Hey guys, welcome back. It's your girl Sade and welcome to Sade's Mix. If you are new here, hi, welcome. And if you're returning, thank you so much. Today we're going to talk about the controversial story of Darlie Routier, a mother who is currently sitting on death row for a crime she says she did not commit. If you guys are interested in true crime and my life here in South Florida, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. I am here for you guys on Sunday. Do you guys like my wig today? Yeah, I couldn't get my natural hair to get it going, so I popped this bad boy on. I'll list this bad boy in the descriptions down below, but enough of my rambling. Let's get into Darlie's story. So Darlie Lynn Peck was born on January 4th of 1970 in a small town called Altoona, Pennsylvania. Not much is really said about Darlie's upbringing or her childhood, but what is known is that in 1985, the family would actually relocate to Lubbock, Texas. And this is where she would meet her future husband, Darren, at the age of 15. Now, I'm not going to give Darren a backstory because it's not relevant to the story, but I do want to point out that when Darren met Darlie, he was 17. Darlie, once again, was 15, and the two would actually meet due to Darlie's mother, who is also named Darlie. I know, super hella confusing. Bear with me because there's a lot of D names in this story. Now you see, the mom noticed in Darren that he was bright, he was ambitious, he had dreams, he had aspiration, and she wanted that for her daughter. She just knew that he was gonna take her places. And you know, she wasn't wrong in many ways. It was said that when Darlie, the daughter, met Darren, it was an instant connection and the two were inseparable. So much so that they would go ahead and get married in August of 1988 when Darlie turned 18. The now Routiers wasted no time on starting a family, and they would go on to have 3 kids. There was Devin, who was born on June 14th of 1989, so just a couple months after their marriage. He was followed by Damien, who was born on February 19th of 1991, and then Drake, who was born on October 18th of 1995. Everybody in this family's name is with a D, and I always get them confused, so bear with me. Hopefully I get it right for this video. The family wound up living a very lavish lifestyle, and Darlie's mother was right. Darren was a very successful businessman. It was said that he dealt with either computer repair or testing computer electronics, but at the time his business was booming, and so much so that the family was able to move to a prestigious area in Dallas, Texas called Rowlett, Texas. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not to anyone that lives there, but yeah, they wound up purchasing pretty much a mini mansion, 2-story house, and they put thousands upon thousands of dollars in just renovating it. It was even said that Darren would purchase a Jaguar so that he could leave it in a drive-through so that the rest of the neighbors would see it. And he would also go on to purchase a 27-foot cruise boat. So he was kind of showboating at this point. And so was Darlie. Darlie loved her lifestyle. She was constantly wearing skimpy outfits and just living her best life. She even wound up enlarging her breast to a size EE. Now, when I read this as a big-chested girl, I was like, baby, your back, everything has to hurt. But she wanted to be noticed, and she made sure she was noticed. Now, many people would describe Darlie as being a very doting mom, a very caring mom who was very attentive to her sons and was just very involved in the neighborhood. She would bake cookies for the neighborhood kids, and she would have functions and just have all the kids come over. And then there was another side to Darlie. Many people would describe Darlie as being very materialistic and just self-centered, that she always had to be the center of attention, and that was the reason why she wound up getting, as they quoted, Playboy model breasts, that she always just needed to be front and center, and if she wasn't getting the attention, she would throw a fit. And they continued to live this very bougie, very lavish lifestyle, and everything appeared to be going well for the Routiers. However, things were not as they seemed. The Routiers were actually swimming in debt. They weren't able to really maintain this lavish lifestyle, so much so that they owed the IRS at least $10,000 in back taxes, which is equivalent to $21,000 today, and they had an alarming credit card debt, but they just could not stop spending. It was said that their credit card debt was anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000, which would equal to $25,000 to $30,000 today. There was even talks about possible domestic violence between the two, but that was never truly confirmed. But what we do know, on May 3rd of 1996, Darlie would actually sit down and write a suicide note and just explaining to her boys that she didn't want them to feel bad, that this was her choice, that she really didn't have any energy or strength, and at everything that has happened in her life has just been so hard. Darren would actually walk in on Darlie writing this note, and he would try his best to comfort her and reassure her that the family would get through this. And it was said at the end of the night that, you know, she put the pen down, she got back with Darren, and they continued to move on. And it seemed like the family was on the right path to healing, or so it would appear. So on June 6th of 1996, Darlie would go ahead and make a 6-minute 911 call, just pleading for emergency services and police to come to her house because an intruder had broken. Now, I am not going to play the 911 call. However, I will list it in the description box down below. It is heartbreaking and it could be triggering, but I'm sure that there are curious cats out there that may want to hear it. So of course, I will list it in the description box down below. But back to the story. And then you hear her sobbing and screaming, and she's asking for someone to please come to 5801 Eagle Drive. That is where they reside. And the dispatcher is just trying to get some information from her, like what the hell is going on? Because once again, they live in a very prestigious area, so crime typically did not happen in that area. The dispatcher was kind of, what are you saying? You can hear her saying that she was sleeping downstairs with her boys, which was Devin and Damien, and that someone had came in and stabbed her and the kids. And when she awoke, she was fighting the intruder off, who would run out the garage. And this intruder would also proceed to drop the knife before exiting the house. Now, Darren was also in the house at this time, and Darlie starts to scream for him, and he comes rushing down the stairs and runs right to the entertainment room. And what he sees is shocking. He sees Darlie covered in blood, head to toe, bleeding profusely from the neck, and he looks over and he sees his 2 young boys in an entertainment room. Devin is laying flat out on the floor, not moving, and Damien is laying against the wall, and you can see that he is just struggling to catch his breath. So Darren is downstairs and he doesn't know who to attend to first. Darlie is in a panic. She's just saying the boys' names over and over and over, like Damien, Devin, like just in shock. So he decides to tend to the boys first. He goes over to Devin, who is laid on the floor, eyes still open, and he sees the 2 large gashes on his chest. He proceeds to check for a pulse, but there is no pulse. He then proceeds to look over at Damien, and he sees that Damien is up. You can hear him struggling to breathe, and he looks down and he sees that there's a pool of blood forming at his feet. But Darren decides to attend to Devin first, and he proceeds to try to do CPR. Now, at the moment when he presses down on young Devin's chest, he is just immediately squirted with blood, and he came to the conclusion that his son was already dead. He proceeds to go over to Darlie to attend to her, and she is just pacing back and forth, incoherent, and she's saying that the intruder has exited the house. Now, throughout all this chaos, yes, police and ambulance personnel do arrive, and they are just as shocked. Like, how can something like this in a prestigious area happen? When the police walk in, they get a whiff of just blood, and the amount of blood that was everywhere on everybody, they didn't even know who to attend to either. So ambulance personnel wind up taking the boys first, because Darlie was still in a stable condition at this time, and the police needed to get information before they actually took her to the hospital. Police quickly questioned Darlie to hear her side of the story, in which she reiterates that there was an intruder that was standing over her, and when she was awoken, she started to fight him off, and then he proceeded to run through the kitchen. She turned the light on, the intruder dropped the knife and proceeded to exit through the garage. She was then whisked away to the emergency room because, as stated, she had suffered a rather large gash on her neck, and they needed to make sure that she was stable as well. Back at the house, the police are trying to put together like the events and trying to make sense of the crime scene basically. So the police start to follow the blood trail throughout the house. And like I said, there was blood everywhere. And there even appeared to be blood that was cleaned away. And the police were trying to make sense of why somebody would clean up blood. They also noticed that in the garage, there was a slit in one of the windows, but it didn't appear that anyone exited through that window. But then the police thought maybe the intruder never left. So they draw out their guns and they search every inch of that house to only find baby Drake in his crib crying. They check him. He has no marks or bruising. He's A-okay. But the police are just baffled because there is no tracks in the garage to symbolize that somebody ran through there. There seems to be no exit of this individual. So where's the intruder? Where is this person? The police then proceed to check on the outside of the house because if someone did leave the house, they would be covered in head to toe with blood. So there would be blood droplets or something. And as the police walk around the house, they find no evidence of blood, anything undisturbed. Now, what they did find was a couple blocks down was a sock that had both Damien and Devin's blood on it. But otherwise, there was no blood leading up to that. There was no blood trail to and from the house. There was no blood anywhere except for where the murders had occurred. So at the hospital, unfortunately, both boys would be pronounced dead. Devin was dead on arrival and Damien would just die a couple of minutes later. So the only survivor and the only one that could tell the story was Darlie herself. Once Darlie arrived at the hospital, she was immediately placed into surgery because they had to stop the bleeding from the gash that she received on her neck. The gash was only 2 millimeters away from her carotid artery, so if she would have been nicked, she would unfortunately face the same fate as her boys. So the police would have to wait the next day in order to get Darlie's full story of the events. But back at the house, the cops are becoming more and more suspicious of Darlie's story. Like, the evidence is not linking to what she's saying. First thing was, if you were laying next to your sons, how did you not hear such a brutal attack? That was the first thing. They also couldn't understand how there was no blood on the outside of the house and all of it was contained in the inside. Now, that day, it was not raining, clear skies, so they would see some evidence on the outside. Also, the Routiers lived a very lavish lifestyle, as stated, and in the kitchen was all of Darlie's possession, her rings, her jewelry. That was untouched. So it wasn't like this was a robbery gone wrong. So how could this have happened? The police found it super odd that there was also only one set of bloody footprints. Those bloody footprints were Darlie's footprints. So if there was an intruder and she was fighting them off, wouldn't there be another set since they would be dancing with each other? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just wasn't adding up to the police. Before being whisked away to the hospital, Darlie also said that she fought off the intruder, but the house remained untouched. There were a couple of things that seemed to be deliberately thrown about, like a vacuum cleaner and a vase, but overall the house was in shape. So it didn't seem like there was a struggle. It didn't even seem like there was somebody else there. So the police started really thinking that this was not an intruder and somebody in this house committed the crime. This was less than 12 hours after the 911 call that the police truly believed that their prime suspect and the only suspect was Darlie. So finally the next day comes around. Darlie is out of surgery, she's stable, and 2 detectives go over to interview her. And this time, Darlie gives a lot more information than she initially gave the 911 dispatchers and the police that had arrived at the scene. This time, she says that her son, Damien, was the one to wake her up. Now, she never mentioned this. She says that he was tugging at her nightdress saying, "Mommy, mommy." She says that when she opened her eyes, she felt that the man was just getting off of her and that she gave chase, hitting him. And then she turned on the kitchen light. The intruder proceeds to drop the knife, in which she decides to pick up the knife. And she even tells the detective and on the 911 call, because the dispatcher asked her if she picked up the murder weapon, and she says, "Yes, oh my God, did I just ruin the fingerprints?" Which she repeats to the detective, saying that "I probably ruined your chance to ID the individual because my fingerprints will be the only fingerprints on the knife." Now the police are looking at her kind of like, "Baby, why were you so worried about your fingerprints on the knife? Because he was in the house, so we should find his fingerprints everywhere, right? He was touching things, you guys were scuffling." So they thought that I was really odd for her to say not once, not twice, but 3 times. Like, she made it her purpose to let them know that her fingerprints would be the only ones on the knife. So police continued to gather information, and the 2 detectives noted that it appeared that Darlie's wounds, in comparison to her son's, were superficial. It was said that her sons were savagely stabbed several times, where Darlie's stabbing seemed to be very superficial, even possibly self-inflicted. The 2 detectives also went around the emergency room talking to doctors and nurses, and the nurses and doctors would go on to say that it appeared that Darlie was not remorseful, not sad, didn't cry, wasn't as a grieving mother should be. Now, I don't know how you expect someone to react in that situation. Yes, I guess they should be hysterical, but if they're suffering through postpartum, or if they have signs of depression, or they may not be capable of displaying proper emotions. But the police took that and was like, "Yep, she's guilty, not crying over her dead sons. We got it." When I read this, I was just like, this is crappy police work, because we all know that everyone reacts to different situations at different times. Now, it was also said that Darlie at this time was also taking Xanax for her antidepressant, as an antidepressant. So if she was medicated or self-medicating, that would also explain for her lack of emotion or connection. So back at the police station, the police are trying to figure out what's the motive. If there was an intruder, why would the intruder leave the knife? If there was an intruder, why would the intruder leave Darlie to be alive? It just didn't add up. And what really sealed the deal for both the media and the police was on June 16th of 1996, Darlie would have a graveside birthday for both boys. Actually, it was just for Devin because his birthday was on the 16th, but she decided to have a birthday party at his gravesite.
Sprayed silly string, which took maybe 20 seconds. They sang happy birthday, and you hear Darlie.
Happy Devin and Damon.
Why the confetti? Why the balloons? Why the happy?
Just 4 days after the silly string incident, Darlie would be arrested and charged with capital murder, and on January 6th of 1997, the trial would begin. So the prosecutors, they come right out the gate. She is a terrible mother. She is a witch. She was unattentive to her kids, and she wanted to kill them because she wanted to live a very lavish lifestyle with Darren. She was a materialistic woman, and their proof was the silly string incident. How could a mother who is grieving do something like this? They also used the 911 tape against her, in which she repeatedly states that her fingerprints will be the only fingerprints on the murder weapon. They also present the lack of evidence of any intruder inside or outside the home. Darlie's defense was absolutely useless to me in my book, because they didn't produce any real evidence to show that there was an intruder in the house. They also did not present her injuries to the judge or jury, or they did not produce a very crucial event. Prior to the silly string incident, the family would have a memorial for the boys in which you are seeing Darlie hysterical, crying, being held up by family and friends, praying. Like, she was as expected of a grieving mother. And they did not use that in her defense, which is so mind-boggling, because after the judge and jury sentenced her, we'll get to that, they were able to see that tape, and a lot of them said had they had seen that piece of evidence, they probably would not have convicted her for this trial, because there was a lack of evidence to prove that she did it. So her trial would go on to last about a month, and she was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. Currently, Darlie is sitting on death row, where she's been since being sentenced, at the Mountain View unit in Gatesville, Texas. And now you would think that the story ends there, but no, it does not. Many people believe that Darlie is innocent. So her defense team completely dropped the ball. Also, there was several fingerprints that were unknown in the house and have never been properly tested, nor was the sock that was located outside of the house tested. They didn't test anything. So as of now, Darlie is asking for all of that evidence to be tested to prove her innocence. And that, guys, is the terrible story of Darlie Routier. As of now, you know, they're hoping that the evidence will prove that there was an intruder in the house. Darlie and Darren did file for divorce in 2011, and the only reason why he filed for divorce was that Darlie insisted for him to move on, but he still loves her. He still has Drake, who was suffering from leukemia, but he beat it. I'm so happy for him. But it's such a sad story, and it really makes you wonder if there's a possibility that she is innocent. I mean, nothing brings back her boys, but to exonerate her name would be amazing in some points. But then at the same time, it's like there's really no evidence besides like the unknown fingerprint, and why was there a sock outside? So, you know, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this one. What do you think? Do you think that she is a cold-blooded killer who killed her boys for, I don't even know for what? Or do you think that there was absolutely an intruder that did this? I would love to hear what you guys think. I'll list a couple of videos about her case down below in the description box, but that's all I have for you guys. Once again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will be seeing you guys next week, Sunday. Be safe out there. Bye.